Thank you for joining us at this panel on food waste in the dairy and egg sector. I'm Jenn Smith. I lead food and ag innovation programs for Cornell University's Center for Regional Economic Advancement. I want to thank ReFed for inviting me to moderate this conversation and for putting on such an exceptional conference. One of the speakers yesterday referred to it as being one of the nicer conferences with nice people, and you know, I couldn't agree more. Sandra and I were talking about how it's really action oriented, and it's rare to have so many different facets of a very complex system represented, right? So a lot of really valuable stakeholder participation here. The word ecosystem gets thrown around a lot, but you really feel it here. So excited to be here. We are going to talk through this morning some of the challenges seen in the dairy and egg sectors, some of which are shared between dairy and eggs, some of which are unique, and the solutions that are emerging to address these challenges on farm, in food service, at retail, looking at supply chain, policy, regulatory, labeling, consumer behavior. And we're hoping that everyone leaves here feeling inspired to engage with producers to support their effort to reduce dairy and egg waste. So we are going to ask you to hold Q&A until the end, but we'll make sure there's time for that. And to please mute your phones and turn off your pagers if you have one. I'm gonna go ahead and ask the group to do self-introductions to talk about their organization's role in the food system and anything about their works that they'd like you to know as we get started. So we can start here with Jaymes.
Hello, everyone. Jaymes Barrera with a company called Nutrition 101. We're a vertically integrated service provider that works with manufacturers, food processors, distributors to move byproducts from their process to livestock feed. A lot of that involves bridging the gap between what happens on a plant floor or at a distribution facility to getting those products to a farm where they can be utilized and fed. As far as the role, we have a large amount of customers that lean on us to develop solutions that largely don't exist today. So many times we'll be approached by a processor or a manufacturer to find ways to depackage. It could be moved to a different technology, so maybe they're going to anaerobic digestion or they want to find a higher value or use out of their products. Most of our responsibility in that situation is understanding the problem they're trying to solve for and then also looking for ways to move those products for them in a cost-effective manner.
And I want to say in the Catalytic Grant Fund methane workshop yesterday, Shannon Tavona from Tillamook called out 101 as being like such a perfect solution for their needs. The fact that you're kind of a national and therefore a one-stop wherever across the country they're delivering their cheese and ice cream products. So you got a shout out there.
That's nice.
Great. Sandra?
Good morning. I'm Sandra. I work at Kipster. Kipster is a Dutch farm that started about 12 years ago in the Netherlands, and we expanded to the United States 2.5 years ago. Why I'm here as a chicken farmer is because our chickens eat predominantly upcycled feed ingredients. The ratio of their diet is about 70 to 80% upcycled products from the food system. And I will talk a little bit more about how that works and why we do that later on in this presentation.
All right. Graham Williams, Chief Growth Officer at Hatch, Hatch for Hunger. And so we're a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Carmel, Indiana. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But we basically exist to bring animal protein to food banks across the country. So we saw a massive need years ago that food banks and families that get their food from food banks didn't have access to animal protein. And so we started was in eggs. So Hatch was founded by a CEO in the Indianapolis area who had a real passion to end food insecurity and had some great relationships through his company with egg producers. So 2 of the top 5 egg producers in the country sit on our board. We share a friend here with Kipster at MPS Egg Farms, and so yeah, what started in 2017, and I came on in 2021. In the last 3 years, we've gone from serving 6 food banks in 4 states to now 120 food banks across 40 states, doing about 100 million meals a year. So last year we also piloted and stepped into chicken, beef, turkey, and pork. So we are now providing animal protein across the board to food banks. So yeah, we're a 501c3 self-sustainable model. We operate on what's called a shared value model out of Harvard. So we are trying to add value to the producers, friends of ours like Tyson in the room, that we come in and we buy cost-plus product and then turn around and sell it to food banks, and we have like a penny margin in there, sometimes less. It's sometimes even subsidized by money we raise. And so we're trying to sustainably get animal protein into families' mouths. So the role that we play in this is that, historically you might have medium eggs or small eggs that are sometimes being exported. Oftentimes when something's exported, we don't know what kind of waste is existing there. And so we know we want to keep it in the supply chain model in America and be able to feed the families in our country that don't have access. So that's some of what we're doing. We recently joined Tony Robbins' 100 Billion Meals Challenge and project with him, and so we're kind of trying to be a young disruptor in the industry in a good way. So that's it.
That's pretty cool. I don't have that cool of a story. So I'm the CEO of Darigold, based here in Seattle, Washington. We're a cooperative that has around 250 dairy farms supply milk into our 13 processing plants. We process around 23 million pounds of milk a day. We provide fresh dairy products to consumers. We also play in the cheese space and aseptic milk. A lot of exports as well on dry milk powders. Cheese as well gets exported. Always looking for more ways to be more sustainable on the farm as well as on the processing side. So we work with our dairy farms on a lot of different sustainability initiatives. A lot of food waste is fed to the dairy cows, which then convert it to milk and beef. And on the plant side, one of our biggest costs is waste. So always trying to reduce waste just in the manufacturing part of the business, as well as innovating in packaging and shelf life products, making sure that our customers are ordering what is going to end up in the consumer's hands, and then ultimately the right package size that it will all be consumed once they get it home. So been part of the dairy industry my whole life, both on the farm side. I also have a dairy farm, which is in Idaho, and work out of Seattle here in headquarters during the week.
Great. I'm going to drill down with specific questions for each of you, but before we do that, there was one theme that really emerged. We had a pre-call and talked through what we want to talk about with this group, and similar to yesterday when the former deputy head of the USDA noted that date labeling is a really productive, bipartisan, positive-sum game topic that requires low intermediation in terms of, catalyzing growth. Right? These are relatively simple changes that could be made. That topic, how packaging and consumer behaviors around packaging and package dating contribute to waste, came up across the board. So I would love to hear from each of you what effective communication strategies we're seeing for educating consumers on product safety and potential changes that can be made. And Allan, we can start with you because you have the mic.
All right. So the biggest thing for us as a processor is food safety. So when we know that our products can last a lot longer than a best before date, but it's always the threat of litigation that comes from, foodborne illness. And the longer that product is out of our control in the hands of a consumer, we are less sure how it's handled, and there's always greater risk for food contamination. So regulation plays a big part in what we're allowed to do, but it really is making sure the consumer buys what they need and use it. That's probably the biggest opportunity. We can extend shelf life on many products, and we do. There is also a cost associated with that, so not all consumers can afford to pay the higher cost of some of them products, and that's why we still play in the fresh milk business as well. It's just lower cost, but it comes in larger volumes, so we're not always sure how soon that product is consumed either. So it really is a balance between regulation, risk, and trying to change consumers' behavior more than anything.
All right. Yeah, we're a little different. We don't own the chickens or the eggs. We partner with other producers. But when it comes to regulation, I'll echo that. I mean, number one thing is always going to be food safety. When it comes to dating in the egg industry, it's different in every state. So I think that's where it's kind of somewhat confusing at times and how to go about that. When we're taking eggs from, one state to another, there are some states where, depending on what the cartons are, they might be 24 days. It might be best by, it might be sell by. There might be 30 days. The most common would be like a 45-day stamp, which is what we are taking most places. And then you can also have a 60-day stamp. While at the same time, these eggs can be exported halfway across the world with a 180-day stamp. So it makes it an interesting conversation around food safety. But what we do is just adhere to the regulations in each state and kind of play in those parameters and make sure that anything that we're taking, we know ahead of time. And everything that we're doing, we're not necessarily, before we came along, eggs were most often going to food banks on a retail recovery side or USDA. So what we do is really fresh eggs. So we're not worried about kind of the last few days of that because we are taking it to them with 30, 45, 60 days on there.
What happens to the eggs that are just a few more days? Are they going to end up in the dumpster or what?
Very rarely is there like dumpster eggs going to the dumpster. They'll usually go, into the pasteurization process and get broken and taken into liquid eggs or powdered eggs.
Yeah, we produce eggs, so he mentioned most of it, but it is a nightmare to have all these different labels in all these different states and all these different expiration dates. And once you have it all down, it makes it a little easier, but when you just get started, it doesn't make any sense. And then there's also, when the expiration date is there, they could be, if you keep them in the fridge, they could be eaten for a longer time. So we also try to tell the consumer, like, hey, you can do these tricks and this, and then you can see if your egg is still good. So just don't throw it out because your package says so. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job of hitting on some of the, challenges. What I find interesting is for our role, it's much different. We're at the end of, the chain in a way where, the consumer doesn't want to buy the product because it's at date or near date. It's amazing how much product we see that's actually at near date, not necessarily expired. Extracting maximum value would mean, all right, it's donated to someone like Graham and his team to where they're able to then repurpose it for human consumption. And then we're largely involved by the time that all of those things have either failed or the infrastructure doesn't support it. And now we're looking for ways to recover that product and again get the highest use value out of the material. So our concerns largely rest on animal welfare, safety, making sure that we're putting a feed or a product in a livestock application that meets the needs of the animal. I think when I really dig into the challenges that come with that. Obviously, the more things that happen at a packaging or production level that changes the material to extend shelf life and do things, we do see some shift in responsibility in terms of where the waste generation occurs. You mentioned extended shelf life. That's great for the consumer in most scenarios because you're seeing more products getting sold before they reach end date. But that process in of itself generates more waste at a production level, so that then shifts to the producer. The positive thing in that is usually producers have more control than consumers as to what happens with that material. So it's cause and effect. There's a lot of things that occur, and it is certainly a very complicated environment.
Thanks. I'm going to stick with this kind of regulatory line of questioning here. And Graham, I'm going to ask you to weigh in. So due to a 2009 law, eggs resulting from the process of raising chickens for meat, broiler eggs, must be discarded, right? They can't be used as breakers in industrial food prep. They have to be totally discarded, resulting in the loss of about 400 million perfectly good eggs each year, right? The USDA has done extensive testing, and they're perfectly safe eggs to be pasteurized and used as breakers in that kind of industrial context. So how did we get to this point where we're throwing away 400 million usable eggs, and how do we move forward? I had the opportunity to talk with Representative Josh Riley, who's out of New York State, which is where I'm based, and he's got a bipartisan bill that's with the House now that would ask the FDA to re-regulate that. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, a hot topic in what we're dealing with, and you know, we work very closely with the egg industry and the chicken industry, and so it's kind of a balance there. I mean, both sides have kind of a different perspective on the safety regulation around it, and they have different timing that they have to go after. They have to adhere to after the egg is laid, 36 hours and 48 hours. And so, how do we get there? Yeah, I mean, there was different salmonella that was happening, and it was hard to pinpoint. And so, you know, years ago in 2009, this law was put in place. And so, for us at Hatch, we would love to see both the broiler and the layer industry come together and create a solution here. You know, we're in the business of bringing meals to families in our country that need meals. And so 400 million meals, 400 million eggs is a lot. And so it could feed a lot of people. You know, those would go into pasteurization. They would become liquid form. It would change some things in the industries, both of them. But, you know, currently those eggs are being thrown away. Sometimes they're being put into pet food. And so our position is that we'd love to see both sides come together and create a solution. You know, we don't really swing too hard in one way or the other, but we want to see a solution made, and we're working to try and create a solution there because we think there can be a win-win for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Sandra, is there anything you want to add on that?
No, I think there's just taking a step back, and you know, we just went through the scarcity this past winter with the bird flu, and assuming that the bird flu might come back again in the fall when the winter season starts and it cools down again. Looking at how can we better prepare and have eggs available, and look at all, you know, we in the Netherlands, for example, we also put medium and small in those instances in the packaging, and just get you know, mix it up with the large, and then consumers understand and appreciate this is an emergency, this is what we can do. But there's regulations and retail specs that prevent that from happening too. So I think we can just have a broader discussion on what goes in a pack and why, and what is wasted.
While you have the mic, Sandra, do you want to tell us about Kipster's vision for animal first farming, and how you're catering to the instincts and needs of your chickens?
Yeah, sure. So Kipster was founded by a third-generation poultry farmer who went bankrupt in his early 30s and had a really super large egg production facility and facilities across Europe. And so he paused and took a step back and thought, wow, is there a different model that I should be looking at? Like, what happened, and what is the industry doing? And so he really took some time to go to workshops that the animal welfare organizations organized, and realized that he didn't know much about chickens other than feed conversion and getting them to be as productive as possible, and realize that they, form friendships and have actually can recognize 100 people and do a lot of things that we are not aware of. And so he decided, okay, if I start over, I want to really look at what a chicken needs. It's a forest bird, and worked with the animal welfare organizations on designing the farm to, give the chicken the space and everything that she needs. And then also looking at the environmental impact. So what is actually the role of an animal in a food system? It's not just to produce food for people as fast and as much as they can, but they also are really good in processing waste into valuable proteins for people. And as you alluded to, the dairy cows also eat a lot of byproducts, pigs do, but what if we do that to a larger extent? So we worked with the Agricultural University in the Netherlands to really look at how can we do this at 80% of the byproducts so that we can move away from the land and free that up to feed people. And that means, there's a lot of food waste in the system and byproducts. Of course, we need to reduce food waste and repurpose it, but whatever's left, pigs and chickens and cows can actually do something really awesome with that. So that's what we decided to do, and that's how our company works. So we really are looking at the byproducts to feed our animals and for them to convert that and also to use that fertilizer that comes out. And while the chicken lives, to try to do that as best as we can while she's in a commercial setting.
Can you talk a little bit about the R&D that went into using upcycled feed on the farm? And, Jaymes, this kind of is a point of intersection with the work that you're doing too. So how are you controlling for variability? How do you know that the food that is being diverted from the landfills is right to feed to animals, or how do you treat that?
Sure, yeah, it's not that we just throw banana peels and carrots and whatever we have at the chickens, because the chickens are pretty finicky and they have a very delicate system and they do need to produce eggs and live as long as they can. So we work with a feed mill, we work with a nutritionist, we work with a veterinarian and the farm manager, and we meet every 2 weeks and see, hey, how is this feed actually working out? Is the shell quality good? Is the yolk okay? Is the chicken losing feathers? Are they starting to peck each other? So there's so many different expressions of the chicken itself where you can see like maybe she's lacking something or whatever, and then adjust the feed. And we need to make sure that the nutrients are in there, enough energy, protein, a complete amino acid profile, all the minerals and everything. So it took a long time to actually get to where we are, and it's not perfect yet. We're still working on it. So.
Yeah, I think you've hit on it really well. I mean, it really boils down to a lot of strong communication. Outside of our own nutritionists, you have on-farm nutritionists, veterinary. We're collaborating with the waste generators to understand products and volumes, and there's just a lot of communication that goes into it. I think for me, it was probably the most eye-opening experience when I came on board with 101 and actually realized how complicated the whole process was. Being around farm at a young age, you can see, okay, yes, animals can recycle byproducts, and it's a fairly common, long-standing practice. This is nothing new that we're talking about here, but when you try to apply that at a large commercial scale, it can become very complicated. I think for you, it's unique because you have one farm that you're doing that, and you're very specific to the types of byproducts that you're managing, whereas the byproducts that we see into our operation are very dynamic. And Allan and I were talking about this specifically dairy. It is amazing, though, sometimes, even though how dynamic they are, how consistent the quality of the feed that comes out of that process actually is. So,
Allan, anything you want to weigh in on that?
Ultimately, as much as we like to change consumer behavior, that is one of the hardest things to do. So most of what we do is cater to what the consumer already wants, rather than trying to change behaviors. That's probably the most difficult thing to do. So in terms of eggs and missized or smaller eggs, convincing consumers that it's fine and that's what they want, that's a difficult thing to do.
Allan, we're going to stick with you for a moment. So Darigold, as a co-op, has 300 family farms, some with herds as small as 50, some with more than 20,000, according to
That's a
your
bit of a
publicist.
stretch, but
What can you tell us about how dairies forecast demand to minimize surplus, and then how that changes at different scales of operation?
yeah, so it starts with the demand plan from the consumer. So it starts with fresh milk. Fresh milk is ordered every day. So what we make on a daily basis on fresh goes out, goes to the stores on a daily basis. You then back up to some of the longer shelf life products. So the aseptic or extended shelf life, 60 to 90-day liquid products, culture products that are around 60 days shelf life. Those can all get made and stored knowing that you're projecting forward sales. You move on down the line, you get to your bigger ingredient sales, so big blocks of cheese that go to repurposers as an ingredient. And then ultimately, the remaining milk supply goes into powdered milk because it's stable for up to 2 years. So we don't really run into end of date product per se. It's all made in sequence from demand from the consumer as fresh all the way up to extended dry products that we'll keep for a long time.
What role does the cooperative play as a collective in addressing supply, demand, and surplus questions?
So typically in the co-op setting, we allow producers to make independent decisions on what they want to produce. So there are times when we have processing capacity issues that we'll implement quotas of types to say don't produce more because we can't handle the milk, we can't find a place to go with it. So it's really processing constraints that would limit our producers on farm to limit production. For the rest, they're pretty free to produce what they want. And we typically have enough processing capacity in-house to handle that milk. So we will buy and sell some raw milk, but at the end of the day, we have enough capacity to handle our producers' milk.
Graham, you mentioned that Hatch has a shared value business model. So let's dig in on that a little. What makes it sustainable? How do you see it scaling, and what will the impact be as it scales?
Yeah, we like I said earlier, shared value model is something that we say often. We saw kind of a hole in the system there where food banks didn't have access to animal protein, and so when they were getting especially eggs, it was really just retail recovery. It was USDA, which was very spotty, non-consistent, non-reliable. As we met with food banks, they wanted eggs, and so we found an access point into getting in medium eggs. And so we work very hard to build trusted and sustained relationships with our animal protein producers, where we come in and we buy their product at a cost plus model, and then we turn around and get it to food banks. And so we're saving food banks generally 25 to 45% on what their budget looks like, and they can come in and purchase product with us, while that money that comes to the system is just allowing Hatch to continue to sustain itself, cover our G&A. And so that's kind of what that model looks like. I mean, we've had tremendous growth in the last 3 years, going from 2 million meals to 100 million meals, and recently joining, like I said, the Robbins Challenge. And we have a goal. Our initial goal was 100 million meals by 2023. By 2025. We did it in 2023. And so now our new goal is 1 million meals a day by 2028. And so we've stepped into these other proteins. We see this as a model that really can work. We like to think it's a business solution to a social problem. And so we wanted to really bring alongside minds and other people who are really committed to this cause and saying, hey, like, it shouldn't happen on our watch that families that have to come to food banks to get food don't have access to animal protein. And so we have this visual sometimes that we talk about where, a kid in the morning going to school on a Pop-Tart. And what does it look like for that kid to go to school on 2 eggs in the morning? What could it look like for the kid to actually eat that 2 eggs after cooking it with a mom, a dad, parents, grandparents? That's not just changing the kid's nutrition, that's changing the kid's whole life. And so that's like a model. That's something that we're trying to go after and do. And we feel like we're building this wall, and we're not coming down until it gets built. So we think there's a real role here that we can play and have been able to, and so we're trying to come alongside and bring in new partners to do it with us.
So on that topic of new partners, if folks from outside of your current range were interested in engaging with you, like what's the best way for them to plug into the work that Hatch is
Yeah,
doing?
that's great. Obviously, we in the last 3 years, I feel like we've done a really good job of putting our head down and doing the work. And so just now in the last few months, we've really started saying, hey, like it's time for us to also be at things like this and start sharing our story. And so that was the intrigue initially. But then we also are in our first ever capital raise. So we've done this whole thing without ever raising money. We've gone from 0 meals to 100 million meals with no money. And so we're now raising 25 million as we plan to scale from 100 million meals to 365 million meals a day. So that's obviously one way, right? If there's a company that wants to come alongside us, the Tony Robbins came alongside us with $1 million, which was incredibly generous as a match, and we raised 3 from that. So we are excited about that next step, scaling our organization, and really, this is a one-time raise for us. We're not looking to do this as a traditional nonprofit might, where you have a certain amount of money you have to raise every year. This is a one-time thing, and we're going to be turning this into a revolving door, where this is the only time that we ever have to raise money.
Wow, working with philanthropic funders, industry players, open to everyone?
Yeah, we're creating kind of an alliance of people in the protein industry, hunger advocates like Tony, and other foundations. Yeah, I've spoken to some great companies and organizations while we've been here, and we've got a few other upcoming appointments that we're excited about. So yeah, there's a lot of different players in the space that want to do good work and that's the problem. So many people are doing good work, right? So, but we feel like our model is a little different in the sustainable component. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. Again, such a great convening for those meaningful interactions and positive conversations. So glad that's
This conference is amazing. So we won't miss another one.
yeah, right on. Jaymes, I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm also going to note, Allan, Sandra, I'd love for you to weave your thoughts into this too. So expanding from animal feed and upcycling, can you describe some of the geographic, logistic, economic frictions that producers are encountering when they're trying to divert food from landfill?
Yeah, the logistics is, it's a significant issue. Usually it's the biggest barrier, and not just the logistics of transporting from point A to point B, but the logistics of getting that material for us out of a plant setting, putting in collection containers or equipment to make it easy, because usually the largest barrier is at a manufacturing level. It's the change that needs to occur. Everyone's so used to doing things a certain way. It's hard to get those folks to change, even though it may be easier or even more simplified than what they're doing today. I think that generally contributes to a large portion of why producers don't switch from what they're doing. And then you get into the logistics of actually having facilities in markets that are connected to farms that can feed, and then the logistics of getting those products to a farm in a form that can be fed. So many different moving components of the whole entire value chain. And that isn't even getting into the packaging and all the other products that go along with it. And how do I get it in this form into another form that is actually useful? So very fun stuff.
What's behind the resistance, do you think?
From a change perspective, I think, you certainly meet a lot of people here at this conference that believe in what needs to be done and can operate as change agents at an organizational level. Sometimes it's cost. We generally find the cost can be justified through cost offsets just by taking products and moving them to animal feed. There is some cost offset that generally allows for things to be even on par with landfill, in many scenarios less than moving materials to landfill. So sometimes I struggle with, okay, why? Just because it's just the change of making a change.
Human psychology.
Yes. I guess we should tell them not to do it, and then maybe they would. But yes, human psychology.
I suspect there's some more behind that, and I don't know, Sandra or Allan, if either of you have any thoughts you want to weigh in.
Yeah, just for our perspective, the challenges are we are really small. We only have 75,000 chickens. That I know some people here might think that's a lot, but it's really not. And so the feed mill that we work with is huge. They make feed for all kinds of livestock species. And we are in the middle of corn and soy country, so it's like we can only get our hands on the byproducts from corn and soy. And then when we do want some other ones, then sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm excited. I found this stream of byproduct from. They're like, well, we don't have like little feed bins just for Kipster, like we don't have that capacity as a mill. And so it's been challenging to really, in the Netherlands we work with a feed mill that's specialized in this kind of product. But here we haven't found that partner yet, and it's something we'll have to look at.
Yeah, some of it ends up being regulation again. So we have product that ends up, testing positive for some bacteria, and it's not allowed to leave our control. So the only choice is rework it, which means run it through the whole process again if we can, or choose to landfill it. So even when we look at calf ranches that could take, say, powdered product, we know they're going to repasteurize. We can't let it get out of our control. So even if we want to, we can't release it. So some of it is regulation.
Well, just kind of even building on that, it's also risk. A lot of partners that we work with, generally when the conversations start, it takes some time to get a manufacturer on board with feeding byproducts because there's always some concern about the risk or liability associated with it. We generally do work through that. As an organization, we do take title to the products that we receive, so that does help. But there's always that in the back of the mind, to your point, where like, maybe we're not going to do this because we don't want to be held liable if, God forbid, there was a bunch of chickens or something were to die. I mean, that would be horrible, right? So it certainly plays into people's decision making.
I want to add one more thing. I think what we also run into is that we want to move away from certain crops that are now used because they have a really good amino acid profile, like soy is a very complete protein, but we want to reduce our soy. And so we actually are mixing in animal byproducts into the feed, which needed an exception from the Certified Humane certification, as well as the retailer that we partner with, to make sure that we could put it out in the market. And then there's this consumer perception that chickens need to eat vegetarian feed. I can tell you, chickens are not vegetarians. So there's this mismatch with what consumers have in mind, like what sustainability is and what's good for chicken and the reality. And I think there's also some discussion needed about, what can they eat? And it turns out consumers actually don't know what the chickens eat. They just think they eat grass all day. So there's lots of education still that we need to do too.
What role does Kipster play, or how does consumer education factor into your business model?
Yeah, so we communicate about that on social media. We're still very small. We are a startup, so we don't have a big following. So I don't know how we would reach all consumers, but we're starting the conversation. We also have webcams in our camera and a visitor center so people can come and see and have that discussion with us. So that's what we do right now.
Jaymes, one more question for you. Beyond feed for farms, what applications has 101 found for dairy and egg surplus?
Yeah, so I guess our intentions always start with looking for ways to manage the products to their highest and best use. So that always starts with feed in our application. I mean, it should start well before that with some form of source reduction or donation, which most of our customers we work with to have those types of discussions. And then once you move outside of that, you're looking at anaerobic digestion, compost. Generally, the same barriers apply. The logistics, the collection, moving it from point A to point B, the processing. You're just moving that material to a different form to be utilized for a different purpose. Those usually come with higher cost in most situations. But nonetheless, for clients that are committed to moving away from a landfill and having that impact, it's certainly something that we get a lot of questions on, but also areas that we support our clients in.
Allan, to what degree are farms in your co-op adopting digester technologies? Is that something that's common, uncommon, common at a certain scale?
Yeah, all of the above. We have some, most have been supported by oil and gas, who then take the carbon credits to offset their carbon. That's how most of them have been built. The rest is through government funding, which there again, we can argue is sustainable or not. So not to a huge degree. The climate itself, where a lot of our milk is, you tend to have to build fully insulated facilities, which get really expensive. A lot of the payback on them was through the gas portion, which would go to California. They're again funded by the government, really high gas costs. So they wouldn't use that gas internally because you couldn't pay for the digester. So a lot of different technology, whether it's separation of manure to make sure that less methane is being produced, is probably the biggest focus. So capping lagoons and flaring off any methane that's created, or making sure that the fiber portion is out of the manure so it doesn't digest in the first place. Acidification of lagoons to try to stop that whole process from happening in the first place. A lot of those things are the focus on farm.
Thanks. Sandra, you mentioned 75,000 birds, right? Are you packaging and selling the manure? You're probably not growing crops if you're feeding them food scrap diet. So are you doing anything with the manure?
Yeah, our franchise partner, MPS Egg Farms, takes that litter and also from their own farms, and they work with a fertilizer company to mix it into a comprehensive fertilizer that goes to the crop farmers in the area.
Great. I want to make sure there's time for audience questions. Before we do that, we've got a nice audience here, judging from every conversation I've had and the panels I've seen. It's policymakers, entrepreneurs, researchers, funders, boots on the ground, warriors, reducing food waste. What areas would you most like these change makers to focus on to assist dairy and egg producers in their efforts to reduce food waste and put us in a stronger position in the future? We can start with Allan.
I think regulation is one of the things we come up against the most. So I think work in that space would be helpful. I think even on the egg side, even though we're not in eggs, like the broiler breeder egg thing is just a little ridiculous to me. So those things, maybe a little protection from litigation if that's possible. We all know poultry has salmonella in it, and we all know people need to cook it before they eat it because there's a huge risk. So I think if we litigated a little less and people chilled out a little bit about taking a chance on some spoiled product, we could probably make a lot more progress.
Graham?
I can't talk if Allan keeps holding my microphone. No, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on kind of where you are in the list of people that you named. But we would love to see, like I said earlier, we'd love to see something happen between the two parties, broilers and layers, and be able to have some extra meals go into the system. We'd love to see other, change makers and companies come alongside what we're doing at Hatch, and really doesn't mean that it has to be with Hatch, but partner with us in some way. We're a small, nimble team We've tried to keep it that way so that we can make things happen and not be some big, well-oiled machine that can't move, but we try to move fast and move in a direction of worthy things. So we'd love to see that. I mean, there's lots of conversations that have happened with avian influenza there, and other policy around cage-free eggs, and you know how that shifted. Everything was shifting towards cage-free, and then it was not, and then laws are changed during avian influenza. So there's a lot of different things that are happening there. But really, anyone who's doing work in this space and thinks that there's any way possible to partner with us, we'd love to have a conversation with you.
And so in addition to the 400 million eggs that are just not being utilized, there's also 350 million little roosters that are going into the grinder every year because they're the brothers of the laying hens. So for example, when I need to order 24,000 new hens, there's 24,000 little boys that come with it. But they are useless because they don't lay eggs, obviously. And they are discarded off now they're not completely wasted. They go to livestock feed or pet food. But we would like to actually bring them back into the supply chain and raise them to feed people with it, meat birds. We do that in the Netherlands because the infrastructure exists. We bring them to market, and actually it always sells out. Here we raised the first few flocks and then realized there was not a good processing infrastructure, and we were sitting on this pile of meat, which we donated thanks to Tyson Foods and the gleaners in Indianapolis. We were able to still get that to people. So that is an area that we're currently looking at, and also the layer hens, when they're done, they used to be eaten as soup chickens or whatever. Right now, they're also killed on the farm or landfilled or go to rendering. So we're trying to figure that out with partners, like how can we bring that back to market, because it's a wasted protein source.
I'll note, I work with a startup through our program that is developing a technology that resexes unhatched male chicks through sonic vibration. There are a couple of Israeli startups that are addressing this issue, so it's
We
super,
just did that
super
last
space
week.
age.
Yeah, for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's good. What startup are you working with?
It's called Respect, and it was installed in the hatchery in Nebraska last week at Hendrix Genetics. So we see that as a temporary solution. So there will still be like 150 little roosters that are going to farm next week, but yeah, so that is
Progress. Yeah, cool. Jaymes?
I think everyone here has touched on most everything that I had in mind. The only other addition I would add is, Allan, you hit on subsidies. So I think from a subsidy standpoint, I certainly don't want to call it any specific technology or anything like that, but it would be useful when we look at, how the EPA represents the wasted food scale, source reduction, all the way on down to, landfill or incineration. It would be nice if subsidies or, I guess, the incentives aligned with that food scale and encouraged the right type of activities.
Great. Well, we have some time for questions, and I'm going to ask you to speak into the mic, and I'm going to grab this mic. And I see two in the back.
Hi, thank you all. I work in I work for a county in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my job is to implement a law that requires large grocery stores and supermarkets to donate their surplus. And when I go into these stores, often I'm told by managers that that they don't have any dairy or eggs to donate, or they have very little to donate because they have mandatory buyback agreements with their vendors or with the producers. And from there, no one can tell me what happens to the product. I have heard there was one instance where someone told me that the product often gets destroyed or sent to animal feed. So I'm really trying to understand, do these mandatory buyback agreements with supermarkets, does it lead to food that could be donated not making it to people?
Depends on the retailer and the contract you have with them. So some, they take control of ordering, so they make sure that whatever is there gets sold. They're pretty good at dialing that in. And I'm thinking specifically fresh milk. On some of the other extended shelf life products, if we take them back, we usually take them back and change vendors. So like a dollar store would get it or a grocery outlet would get it, really discount the price hard so that we make sure that it sells in time. So I'm not aware, for us anyways, that we take product back to destroy it. It would always end up in another retailer's hand, or ultimately we have done some donation programs as well, but most of it ends up still being sold, but through a different channel.
Thank you. And also, I'm not accusing any of you of that practice. I'm just trying to understand broadly. Like, is this something that, in a place like Bay Area, California, where donations required, is this a blind spot? We don't have the expertise.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of the laws in California, even though we do business in California. Limited through retail chain, it's mostly food service. But I don't believe that forcing that into donation would hinder anything. I don't see that as an issue per se. Something that we definitely wouldn't try a workaround. I mean, ultimately, what we're concerned about is it ends up in someone's hands that's going to consume it. The last thing we want is to landfill perfectly good food. Our farmers would be very upset if they knew everything they worked so hard to make ended up being landfilled. So we would not allow that to happen.
Thanks.
Great panel. Thanks so much. I'm Heather Trim with Zero Waste Washington, so here, Washington State. And I've got two questions. A quick egg question, which is just out of curiosity, how long generally does a fresh egg last in the fridge once you put it in, like as soon as you bring it home? So that's my first question. That should be a quick answer, I hope.
I guess depends on the state.
Okay, in Washington State.
I mean,
our chickens are robust chickens.
yeah. I had someone come up to me yesterday and ask me a question that was based off kind of some education they got off TikTok, and I'm like, well, I get a lot of my workouts off TikTok, so I guess it's some good stuff on there. I don't really have a great answer to that. I mean, it's all going to depend on how long it just depends on what the farm's what farm it's coming through. It depends on the process of the farm. It depends on the dating and when it actually gets to you. So generally speaking, 60 days is the max that any state regulates that. So 45 days is generally speaking, you can smell the egg. There's tests around putting it in water. But like I said, all these eggs can go and are going across the world with 180 days on there. So if someone was like, I wouldn't do 181 days, I can say that. But I personally, I mean, if I have eggs, they don't stay in my fridge for longer than like a month and a half. So
that's very funny. I thought that would be a quick answer. Okay, so what I think is a longer answer. So we're working with Tom. Zero Waste Washington's working with Tom French over here and some other folks we have a grant to pay for schools to have bulk milk dispensers. And so my question for you, Allan, is with Darigold and in the milk industry in general, we heard like a year ago that there were supply chain issues on the cartons, the little cartons, and then also supply chain issues on the plastic bladder, the bags that would be like a 2.5 or a 5 gallon or 3 gallon. Are we still having those supply chain issues?
Some of it was around the paper vendor for the cartons, and then last year, so we're not the only ones that provide school milk. One of our competitors was running into issues, so we picked up whatever we could volume-wise to supply the schools. I don't believe that issue is totally solved, and if the other vendors are not going to step up, we're committed to putting in more fillers to make sure that we fill that market. But I've heard about the bulk vending. Sounds like a great idea. The other thing that we've worked on and have been unsuccessful, other than the state of Utah, the aseptic milk that doesn't need to be refrigerated. So schools can take large deliveries, don't have to put it in a cooler, just put it in a cooler before they serve it. Also gets around a lot of the issues of milk not being handled properly, kids ending up with spoiled milk that once you have spoiled milk, you probably never drink it again. So, yeah, but the bulk container thing sounds interesting. I'm not sure on the logistics side how that would work, but I mean, it definitely sounds interesting. I am not aware of that, no. But I will check into it.
Hi, my name is Maria. I work with LID Supply Chain Consulting. We're based in Montreal, and we're working on a project with RIFA to measure food loss and waste in manufacturing and distribution, and they want us to focus on dairy and eggs. And I was wondering, I think, Allan, you mentioned the different types of products. Is there more of a trend of waste in manufacturing and distribution for a specific type of dairy product? Or, because I know cheese, for example, the natural production of cheese wastes a lot of whey, and that's repurposed into something else. But I was wondering, first, is it more of a trend in a specific type of product? And is that waste avoidable, or is it just a natural?
Some is just standard waste. You're going to have it any time that you wash something means that you're washing something out of a line or a tank, which is waste. So for us, it's so visible because the cost of everything has gotten so expensive that a pound of waste today is worth twice as what it was, 5 years ago. So a lot of it is a standard that it's really hard to beat. But a lot of it comes down to people and training and process and everything else. And the workforce today is not the same as it was 5 years ago either. So a lot of challenges around people, issues, and process. Not necessarily one product more than the other. Anything that comes out of the dairy, raw milk ends up getting into finished goods of some kind. So even the whey, we dry all the whey and it's all sold for human grade food.
Sandra, I think we have time to squeeze in one quick note. Yesterday, all of us learned the trick that you can refresh a slimy cucumber by dunking it in boiling water. You mentioned there are ways to tell if an egg is still good. What are a couple of tips so that people can extend their own egg life?
Oh, well, yeah, you can put it in the water. And I think if the tip goes up, it's still good, or there's some I can find out.
As long as it's not floating.
Yeah, and then of course when you crack it, if it smells bad, don't eat it. If it smells good, eat it. I mean, there's so much common sense, like the salmonella. Yeah, you just need to make sure everything's clean and eat it when it smells good. But we've lost touch with that. So
use your 5 senses. Yeah. Great. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I'm really grateful to all of you. We have a 15-minute networking break before the final main stage session where they're going to announce the Catalytic Grant Fund awardees. And there's going to be a conversation between Victor Freiberg and Matt Rogers, who is the founder of Mill, which is a home composting system. So that conversation's at noon on the 3rd floor. Please check out the exhibitors and visit the interactive activities, color your tote bag, etc. And then join me in thanking the panel for their knowledge sharing. Thank you, guys.